first let's initially understand why do we have okay. So we'll see what exactly is a class. So even before that, let's understand with an example here, because this is something which is very important to understand. Now, why do we write everything in a class, right? Do we have any other option to write a code or not, right? Now let me just take an example of a human, right? Now when you take human, right, so we can actually divide the actual members of human into two different divisions. The first one is human can have, we normally call behavior, right? Or he can have something called attribute, right? Now when it comes to behavior, like it's like walking or talking, right? But hearing, right? Here, or so these are behaviors of a human, right? And when it comes to attributes, right? Let's say a human have got a hands, right? Like legs, like eyes, and so on. Now here you can see you can depict one thing which doesn't come under either behavior or an attribute or a member. These are members of a human. I mean, hand is a member of a human, a part of human. Leg is a part of human. Or walking, talking, hearing are behaviors of human. Take anything in world, right? It will come under at least a behavior or an attribute for any human. Anything. Watching a movie is a behavior, right? Now, anything, walking somewhere, like sleeping, everything, anything is something which comes under human. Now, this is a base for dividing few things into different sets, right? Take an example of animal, it will have its behavior or an attribute. Take an example of some solid state rock, it will have some behavior and some attribute, right? Take anything in world, right? It will have two different things in common, which is a behavior and an attribute. Which means if I consider anything as a class, right? I can have two things, which is a behavior or an attribute. Attribute is something which depicts what exactly that class contains, like members or attributes. Behavior is something which depicts the functioning of that class. And what are the different functions what human class can do, right? So these are the two different divisions which we have. Now based on these depicts, right, a class is being formatted. Now in the class you can have two things which are variables or attributes, or normally called variables or members, and you have methods or functions. Now variables are like, if we have already in C++ learned, right, then variable is something where you define a data type variable or an object variable, right, or an entity variable, anything which can store some data, right, which can be allocated some memory is a variable. And method or a function is something where we write some logic or some piece of code we write which performs some execution pattern, gives some instructions to operating system, and you will get an output. So this is something which is called as a class, which contains a variable and method, right? And here you can see this is a simple class called program. Now this is same as a human, where you have a human class, right? And here, let's say for human class, even if you have behavior and attribute, right, you need, some main, behavior to start with everything. Like it can be a behavioral attribute. Like take an example of brain. So without brain, right, right? You can't even think, right, whether the attribute is yours or not, or you can't even think whether your behavior, whatever behavior, brain should think. Same way, here you have something called a main method. Main is like a main trigger of any class. Until unless you have a main method in any class, that class, basically if you want to do something exclusively with that class, you can't do anything unless until you have a main. So main is something which is a trigger point of any class. When I say trigger point, which means, see, I've written some code, right? How can I run this? When I run this, it should do something, right? Now, when I am, expecting something from a class to do, I should actually give it a path that, okay, this is a door. I'll open the door and you just get into that door and do some tasks inside. That door is nothing but your main. If you don't have main, you won't be able to run a program, right? And inside that, I can write some code. Now, the main method syntax is you have static void main. Now, this is also called as a function or a method. Now, as I said, a class contains variables and methods, right? Now, how can you define a variable? Now, this is a class. Declaration of class is you have a class which is called as a keyword. Now, this is a registered keyword in .NET, and your name of a class, which is the program. Or you can also define a class as your access modifier. Don't worry, we will learn each and every word, whatever we are actually talking about. You have access modifier public, class, and a class name program. Now, this is something which we are giving. Now, whatever you can see in blue, right, are something which is a keyword reserved in .NET, which means whenever I type in class, which means I'm actually declaring some class. Now, everything is case sensitive in .NET. Now, if you define class as capital C, right, now you can see the color change, which means .NET will never understand what you're doing, right? Which means you have to follow case sensitive. And in C#, right, every keyword in .NET will be in a small case. You can see using, you can see namespace, you can see whatever you can see in blue, right, are in small font or lowercase. But in C#, everything will be in lowercase, right? If you change any of the case, right, it will not work. Let's say if you make static as capital S, right? Now .NET will not understand what is a word. That's why in .NET, if you are using any keyword, you have to follow the casing rules. It's a case sensitive keywords which we have. First one, right? Now you can see that namespace is nothing but a simple logical separation, right? We'll understand namespace when I create more namespaces. Now, let's concentrate on a class and a method. Now, I said a variable, right? So, I'll define a simple variable called int I is equal to 10. Now, this simple statement we would have learned many times in C++, C or everything. Normally, whenever we start programming, we say int I 10 or integer I. We always take even I. I don't know how it actually made convention, but normally when we start to say a simple variable is nothing but a int I is equal to 10 or 0 or something, where this is called as a variable. So by name itself you can see variable, which means the value of this I can change, which is a variable. And this part of statement is, this part of function or code is a method. We normally call this a method or function. Now the basic syntax of a variable is, you will have a data type and the name of that variable you want, name of variable, right, is a basic syntax. And if you want to assign some value, yes, you can assign some. Now this is basic. What is the data type? We'll see all the data types, different data types in .NET, don't worry. But as of now, I'm taking one data type called int. Int I is equal to 10, where my int is a data type, right? And I is nothing but a representation of int, which means I have a int. If I don't declare any name for that, right, I can't use it, right? Same way, If I don't have value in it, I can't use it. Right? So that is your array. And what is your method for a function? A basic syntax of a function is you have an access modifier, which is like a public, like you have access modifier, and your return type and your method name base start and end. So inside this basis, if you have any arguments, you can have arguments. It will start with flower bracket at this flower. Now this is a simple method which we have. So to drill it down to take an example, so let me write a simple method. We have a public which is access modifier. Why I am using public or why I am not using whether, we will come to know in our after classes. And you have a return type. Now return type is something which returns, this method will return something, which means, see, if this is a function, I'll expect something from this section. Right? So that is something which is return type. We'll see how exactly it works. Right? Now if you don't want any return type, just say void. Void means I am returning nothing. But it is very important to mention some return type. I am mentioning it as a void, which is I don't want to return anything. And then the method name. Let's say method name is let's say some get data. Get data is my method name. Open bracket, close bracket, close bracket open. So this is a simple method. Now here I said you have to give arguments. This is optional. If you want to give arguments, you can give. Now arguments are again defined as if you are defining a variable, like let's say int a. This is a simple argument. If you want to give multiple arguments, you can separate it with comma. You have again, let's say int some variable called b. These are your different arguments. Now anyway, these are optional, I said. I mean, you don't have to actually have an argument. As per your requirement, you can take. Also, your access modifier also can be optional if you want to use, but this skeleton is important. You should have a return type, a method name, open brace, close brace, and open a flower bracket and close bracket. Now this is a simple method. Now these are called regular behaviors or methods where you can do some tasks. Now why I haven't considered my main method as a example of function is, now this main method have got a specific syntax. Now anyways, it follows the syntax of method. Like you can see, it returns something. Main is nothing but the name of a method, and it have got some arguments, right? But this syntax is fixed for main. It will always be a static, right? What is static we will get to know soon. And return type void and a main and arguments, right? It follows the same thing, but you have to make sure to write this. If I don't have static to main, right, then this is not a main. This is not a trigger point at all, right? And if it is not returning void, if it is returning int, then again it is not a main. You can see it says not all path return value, right? So this is something which is, this is a method we have, and it should have a argument which is of string type. Now we will see what is this symbols and all, right? So this is a simple method and a variable. Now you can see I have written something in quotes or slashes, right? Now this is called as a comment or a dead code. Now while running program, these things will never run. You don't need this. Now these are only to represent that this is something, like when I say variable, this part of dead code will not run. But while maintaining, or let's say I have written this program and you want to see what I have written, right? Then these comments will give you a good understanding of what I have written. Now it's always a good practice to write comment, right, or wherever it is required. And there are multiple types of comments. I will actually get to that in our upcoming classes. Right? Now let's write a simple program here. Now as this is my console program, right? Let's say I want to show that I am doing some task. Let's say I'll write something called console. Now console is nothing but, as this is a console program, and we know that what is a console, my command prompt. If you go to run and command, now this is my console program, not program. This is my command prompt, which I also called my console window, where I can do. I mean, I can write, I can run some commands on my window. Right. Same way, right? If you have fine, right? So this is our console window which you have, right? Let me set this. So here, so my program output I can see on my console because this is a console type of a program, right? So let's say console dot I want to write something. So I'll say write line out. Let me write something called hello. This is my first program which I have, right? Now, how can I run this program? Is something. So if you remember our previous classes, right? Whenever you write any program, right, what should we do? We have to compile it. Now here in .NET we have actually seen something like compile it and then you have to run it and all, right? But here our editor, Visual Studio, right? Whenever you start writing any program, it will run the compiling program at a background. So in background your compilation will be going on. So that is the reason why, right, whenever you start writing something and if any syntax goes wrong, you will actually get an error. So there are 2 or 3 different types of warnings or errors you will get. Let's say, right, first let's run this program and then we'll see the errors and all, right? So for building this program, you can see in menu we have something called build menu, and you have an option of build solution, right, a rebuild solution or a clean solution. Now what does it mean is, so this solution is nothing but we have a solution. So always in .NET project, right, you can create more than one project in here. We'll create that. So as we go with the different topics, right, I'll be creating different projects. Now all the projects are tagged to one solution. Solution is a combination of projects. So let me open your folder here. Now wherever I've created my project, you can open folder from here itself. Either you can just right click on a project. We have something called open folder in File Explorer. Click on that. Now you can see this is my folder where I have my CS Intro project. Now let me come a step back. Now you can see this is a solution file, which is also called as a SLN file. Now this solution file holds different projects. What does it mean? If I create multiple projects, we'll create multiple projects as we go on. So all those projects will be registered with my SLN, which is a solution file. Now here, when I say build solution, what it will do is, it will build each and every project under the solution. First point. Second point, if you want to build only a certain project, which means if you want to build in this project I want to build only certain program, then you can go to build and you have certain project. You just have to select that, either go to build and run, or right click on this project and say rebuild, which means it will rebuild only that project. Fine. Now someone had a question. Yeah, I mean we can do that. We can run directly. I'm just coming to that. Okay? So if you want to separately build, yes, we can do that. Now, normally what happens, even if you don't build, right, but your class, whatever you're writing and your solution, existing solution, right, whenever you save it, your saving is nothing but it will actually save the file and build and create a exe file. So all these things will be done in one save, right? That will be done. Now how can I run it? Now you can see, in order to run this, you have something called start. Click on this, it will build and it will actually open a console, right? So here we have written it, right? We are just writing it on a console. That is the reason why, if you remember, a black window just opened up and closed, because we are not making it wait for some time. So let's write console dot read some line. So until unless we provide some input, I want my console window to be open. Now let me click on start. Now you can see here This is a console window where you can see hello world. And it is waiting. The pointer is waiting. Why? Because I said read line until I give some key and enter, it won't move out of my method. When I click on, let's say, some keys I entered and enter, it will go out. Now this is nothing but a life cycle of your method. The method will start here, it will print this, and then it will come to read line, right? So your each and every statement will be executed synchronously. Step by step it will actually execute, and then it will come out of your main method. Now that is what happens. Now this is something how you build and run your program. Now that is the first thing. Second thing, how to debug. Now what is debugging? Now debugging is nothing but sometimes you may have to see execution step by step. Now in order to see that, right, you can just go to the line wherever you want to see, and here this pane is something which will hold your debug points, right, which will hold your comment points and everything. Double click on that. Now you can see a dot will be formed and it will be over with a brown color. Now this is something which is called as a debug mode, or you are trying to debug your program. Now let me start it. Now when you start it, now you can see you will actually get execution to your breakpoint. So yes, they are breakpoints. Yes, correct. I was just coming to that. Now if you want to actually debug, now you have to put a breakpoint. Now how to put a breakpoint is select a line wherever you want to put a breakpoint and double click on it. Now this is something which is a breakpoint. Now you can see your whenever it comes to execution at that point, it will actually tries to give a yellow overlay. Now if you want to move, you can just press on F10. F10 is your next statement. Now this would have printed. If you go to console, you can see hello world, it printed, right? F10 again. Now it is waiting for some line. Here you can see. And press some enter. Now it actually came to end of my main method. And press F5. F5 is something which will go out. The main debug options are F10 to go to each line, and F5 to skip and run to the next debug point or completely execute your program. And F11 is something which, if you want to go into method, don't worry, we'll see more debug options as we go on. But this is something where you are debugging to see each and every line of execution. Fine. Now we are we just said we are compiling something and it is creating some executor native code and on OS, and it will run to Q output, right? But what is the final code or final file which got created which will run on OS? So that is nothing but your executor or exe, right? Out of your program, it will create an exe for you, and the exe is something which will be executed on your operating system. Now where it will be created? Let's go to this. There are a few things which are important in every project. Now this is my console library, which is CS Improve. Now this is my main project. I have this CS. Now here you have two different folders, important folders, which is a bin and an obj. Among them, in bin, right, you can see whenever you create a project and start writing up, right, you will have two different options here, which is either debug or release options. Or if you don't see this menu, right, now you can go to something called tools and where is that? You will find it in configuration manager, build and configuration manager, and now here you can see whether you want to run your project in a debug mode or a release mode. Don't worry about what is debug mode or release mode. Normally what happens whenever we are in a development phase, right, you are developing some program, so we always keep our project in debug mode because we want to debug and we want to get micro level of outputs from our program. Now once your product is ready and whenever you are delivering it to your client, then always you will give a release mode exe. Now let me show you how it is done. Now when you say debug mode, right, and whenever you run this program, you can see inside your bin, your folder called debug will be created, and if you go inside this, now you can see here there are many files which will be created. Now, whenever you build your program, right, all these files will be created. And sometimes, whenever you create a project, some files will be created. Now, here you can see application. Now, this is a main exe which will be created with the same name. Now, let me double click on this. Now, you can see when you double click on the exe, whatever code you have written, hello world, and it is waiting for some key. Enter, it will go. Now, this is your main exe. Now, this is how we normally build and run. Now, we have an option called clean solution. What does the clean solution mean? A clean solution or cleans a particular project. It's okay. Now, when a clean solution, what it will do is whatever build exes and different things are build out of your code, right, will be cleaned up first. Let me go and clean this solution. Now you can see few files which are executable files and other things will go. Your other manifest files will stay, because these manifest files are nothing but your executable supporting files. Now how to get it back? Either you can directly run it. When I run it, you can see it will actually create my exe here and then it will run. Now it will go, right? Or what you can do, you can clean solution, it will be cleared first. And when you rebuild or build again, let me click on rebuild. Now you can see it will create it again. When you rebuild, it means it will clean and build solution. That is a rebuild. So this is the process of building. Now, anyways, we have understood how building or how the compilation works. But if you are using your Visual Studio, it's very easy. Whatever theory we have learned, right, it will actually work in a click, right, and it will give you output. That is something how you build and do things. Fine. Now, if you change your program to release mode, let's say, right, if you change it to release mode, then you can see that you will have a new folder created called release, in which you have a manifest files and everything supported to your exe will be created. Now, if you run it, now this is something which is running in a release mode. Now you can see in your release folder you will get a exe. Fine. Now these are your two different modes which you have. Right? And this is something where you have your exes or project outputs, I would say, will be created from your IDE. Now IDE is something which is a very simple. You can see most of the things, right, will actually make you IDE will make your life easy because of so many good options in it. Right? So that is something which is your info. Now here we also call this as a assembly which we have created. Right? Now if you want, you can actually go to the properties and you have something called details. Right? Now here you can see details, where you have options like, okay, this is your product name, right, the version which you have, right, and many more things. What is the file name and all, right, what type. If you remember, we can develop only application type of program. So you can see the type is application, or else if it is a hardware level program, it will give type as a system program, right, and the file versions and everything. Now you can actually maintain this even from here. You can go from solution. This is very important again. Anytime if you want to change any properties of your solution, you can right click on the project and click on properties. Now these are the properties pertaining to your project. Now you can see we have selected .NET Framework 4.5. Anytime if you want to change, you can actually change the framework. And whenever you change any framework, right, make sure that you are first looking at a compatibility level also. We created 4.5, immediately don't just change to 2.0. First analyze what to change and then release. Now in between you can see 3.5, 3.5 client profile, 4.4 client profile. What are client profile frameworks? The client profile are the lighter versions of your main framework, right, which will not have all features. But normally if you are looking for only few features in that, yes, client profile you can use. But normally for development you don't use this. But yes, client profile is something which will be a lighter version of your main version. When I say 3.5 client profile, it's a lighter version of your 3.5. Now the another thing which you have is your output. Now as I have selected my project as a console application, obviously it will give me output on console. And it will give you from console project what different type of projects I can convert. I can convert this console application to Windows application or a class file. I can do anything. Right now, the next thing which is important is assembly information. Now you can see whatever we have seen in here, right, which is the properties of this, are something which you set here, right? In the details you can see the copyright, whatever you mentioned here, and the assembly version, right, and the title, whatever we mentioned here will be, will reflect here. That's how it works. Right? So this is something which we maintain different versions. You can have a file assembly or a file version itself, right, which you can actually maintain. And product name, normally we give whatever product you're doing, and a company, in which company you develop or not, right? Whoever watches at the assembly version, take any exe, take an example of Skype and see, just right click on the exe and see the assembly information, everything like it's a Skype incorporation and everything. That is your application. Main properties of application. We'll come to other things in our upcoming classes. Okay. So that is something which is about your exe or the assembly. Fine. Now coming back to program, now you would have understood what is a class and variable and all. Now let's say this is my class, right? Without class I can't do anything, which means let me just minimize. So these are, you have a minimizers here. You can actually minimize your programs. Now let's say out of class, if I want to run, if I want to define any integer, let's say something, right? Now you can see that this is an error. Now whenever you get a red line beneath your code, right, which means this is an error. Now you can also see that in this window. If you want to see any of these windows, right, like it can be a solution explorer. Now here you can see all the project details, right? And if somehow you close the solution explorer, you always can get it back from a view menu option. Either you can get it directly, you can see solution, the main windows will be here, or else you can go to other windows. Here you can see it. Fine. By chance, let's say I just close this error list, right? I can go to view and you have here error list, right? You can get it back anytime you want. It's handy. Now you can see whenever you get any error, see, as soon as I was typing my program, right, my IDE compiled it and there was a syntax error, it actually underlined it with red and it gave my error, right? And when you double click on that, right, it will actually take you to the specific line you got in there. It says the namespace cannot directly contain members or methods. What does it mean? In namespace you have to have a class to define some variable, right? Now which is, if I define a variable here, yes it will be. See here, as soon as I remove a program, now see here, as soon as I write, it will give me error. As soon as I remove, I haven't saved it. You can see a star here, right? In a file, whenever you see a star on top of your file name, right, which means this file is not saved. And when you save it, the star will go. Fine. So this is your simple program, right, which you have. Now, let's say if I have, like, I don't have a static here, which means I don't have a main method as such, let's say, right? And I want to run this program. Now you can see it will give you error, and you can see what is error here. You can see that it says your exe does not contain a static method which is an entry point. So that's the reason why you should always have a main method which follows same pattern. Right? Now I'll rebuild it so that I can actually get rid of all this and run it. This is called as your error and a main. Now here you can see whenever you rebuild, right, sometimes you may also see warnings. Now you'll always see errors, but if you want to see warnings and messages, click on that. You have to select that. Now you can see it is giving a warning. Warning is something which is for your information, but most of the times, always follow warnings also and try to rectify them. They are not errors. If you have error, your project will not create an exe for you. But if you have a warning, it will create an exe. But solving warnings are always best to do for for our product. Now it says we have defined I value, but we have not used it. Now you can see I haven't used this variable anywhere. But what is the use of this? So it unnecessarily eats up my memory, right? So just comment it out and rebuild it again. Now you can see your warnings are zero, which means these are dead codes, right? Dead code in the sense this will never be executed uh, until unless you uncomment or actually make this active, right? So this is something which is your error window and all. Now here we were talking about comments, right? We have two different types of comments. One is single line comment. So whatever we have seen here is called as a single line comment. Now you also have something called multiple line comment or multi-line comment. Now for multi-line comment we normally use something called /star. Let's say I want to comment the complete this method, multiple lines. Start with /star and end with star and slash. Now you can see the highlighted code will be commented. Right? If you want a shortcut for this, yes, we do have shortcut. We have many shortcuts in Visual Studio. You will be watching our program now. Let me distort everything, right? Even if I distort everything like this, right? I have many shortcuts which comes back. To align your program, your shortcut is Control KD. Right? Sometimes whenever we write program, we normally write, let's say int I'm saying S10 and all, but we don't get. Sometimes it will actually make auto indent, but sometimes you can see even if I do something else, right, it won't take. Then press Control KD, which will take your program to alignment. Same if you want to comment, you have a shortcut called Control KC. Control KC is your commenting your piece of code which you selected. And to uncomment, KU. Control KU is your uncomment. Right? And whenever you comment, so that part of code is your dead code. So let's go ahead with star and all and star. And the third one is for multi-line. For always for your methods, right? Always try to put a comment. Now for that comment, if you just press 3 slashes, right, it will give you for a method. It will actually track your method. You can see how handy it is. I want to write some comments for main. You can see it will automatically take like summary what it is. Let me just say this is a trigger method. Now why do we need comments? Again, we need comment for a maintenance purpose. Like if anyone is using my program, right, it's always better to write some comment in it so that he can understand. Same way you can write comment for any number of methods. Again, to write a comment, select your, just go to the top of your method, just press 3 slash. Right? It will actually give you a comment block of summary. Then you can write something else. So this is called as your comments. Right? So this is a complete structure of how any project in Visual Studio sets. So we'll talk about web projects later when we actually come up to web application development, which is in our ASP.NET or more. But now, yes, for learning C#, right, or database object connections and all that. So this is how it happens. Right. So any questions till now, guys? So this is a basic program and how we actually run it and all right. Now you can actually, to run this program, you can actually click on start, or you have option of F5. F5 or Control F5 is something using which you can run your program. Now what is the difference between your F5 and Control F5? Right. Now when you click on F5, right, it will actually build your program, it will create a new exe for you, and then it will run your program. But when you press your Control F5, which means it will actually start with the old exe whatever you created. That is your Control F5. Right? Now that is the main difference between what is your F5 where you run and your Control F5. Right? Now that's how you can actually run, and your save options, everything will be there here, right? And whatever you can do in this project, right, you have, that is something which you have project options here, right? Intro options. Right? Now let's go to the topics in C# now. Now first let's start with something called keywords. This is something before starting anything you should understand. Or normally let's say it's a .NET keywords or anything or C# keywords. Take it as anything. It is something which we normally call keyword or reserved words, right? I mean we call it with a different name, keywords or reserved words, right? Now what is a keyword or reserved word? So here keyword or reserved word is something which are already registered with .NET or .NET understandable words like class. We have seen many keywords here if you remember. We have a class, we have a namespace, whatever you can see in blue, right, are called as the keywords. And keywords are not supposed to use for our programming, like creating a variable. Now we have seen int I10, right? I can't create int, like I can't use this keyword, right, to define a variable. No, I can't do that because this is a registered keyword with my .NET, which means whenever I type a class, right, then it will consider that you are trying to define a class. But here my intention is to define an integer. So I can't use a keyword. Now even if you use like using, again this is a keyword. No keyword you can actually use for your personal defining of a variables or anything. It can be a variable, a class name or anything, right? So those are called as the keywords. Now you have many keywords. So as we go on, right, you can see many, like here itself you can see your static is a keyword, void, string. You have a public, class, namespace, using, right? You have bool, you have int, you have char, you have string, you have decimal, default, do, while, for, double, else, enum, float, for each. There are so many. So whatever you can see, which you have to use in a syntax of your program, are called as keywords. And no, I mean using a keyword for defining any variable or method name is an illegal declaration. So immediately it will actually give you error and you will not be able to proceed. So always, yes, we have to use user-defined class. I mean, yes, class name or a variable name or a method name or argument, value, name as such. Right? So those are the keywords. So first thing, never use any reserved word or keyword for our program. Okay. Now, so the next one is, let's see what are the data types which we have. Data types in C#. Right? What are different data types we have in C#? So here, we have many data types as such, but let me show you in a disciplined manner. Let me divide all the data types into few sections so that we can have a clear picture on different data types. So firstly, we can divide first data type which hold numbers into integers. Right? I have an integers where, or integer basically, where I can where I can have all the data types of integer type. And then you have a floating, right, which can save a decimal number or a real number. Right? Your integer is a data type or type of a data type which can save only an integral part of a number or just a whole number. But a floating can save a decimal. And you also have something called decimal again. Let me just tell you why I am taking decimal separately than right. And then you have something called boolean, right, where you can actually define your boolean. We'll see what exactly is a boolean. And then you have your string type. Now these are your high-level classifications of data types which we have in document. Now let's see each and every data type which we have. Now beneath integer you have these data types. You have byte, you have s byte, right? You have short, you have u short, you have int, you have u int, you have long, you have u long. So you have long and u long, and you have char. So in .NET, your char, which is a character, is a integer type, right? And you have short. Sorry, we have already seen short, right? Now, these are the data types which we have, right, in integer. So, yes, I am coming to that. So, here you can see byte and s byte. What is s byte? S byte is nothing but a signed byte, right? Signed byte in the sense it can take only positive values. When you see short, when you see u short or u int or u long byte, they are called as a unsigned int or unsigned long or unsigned short, which can take both negative and unsigned int can take only positives, whereas your direct short or direct int or direct long can take both negative values and the positive values. That is your unsigned int or unsigned long. Now, for an integer, we know that integer can say only numbers, right? Now, why do we have these many data types? I can have only one to save everything, right? But think of the requirement which you have, right? Always. See, you may want to save from 1 to 100 only. Let's say you are writing a program which can save, which needs only 1 to 100. Then you can actually choose any data type which can have a capacity to save till 100, right? Which means you don't have to take a integer type or data type which is used for higher number saving. Which means a data type which can save bigger memory value, you don't need in a case where you want to save till 100. So that is the reason, based on your requirement, right, till what number you are going to use, you can select either of. So let me give you a complete memory allocations of this. Byte will actually take 1 byte to will have 1 byte to save data. S byte again 1 byte. Your short is 2 byte data type. Again your 2 byte data type. Your int is 4 bytes. Your unsigned int is 4 bytes again. Your long is 8 bytes. Your u long is again 8 bytes. So this is the longest data type which you have under integers. And your char is 2 bytes. Now, why char is 2 bytes? Maybe you would have learned in C++ that your char is 1 byte, but here it is 2 bytes. Now, why do you have 2 bytes? Is to accommodate Unicodes also, like Unicodes in the sense other languages, right? Other language words, right? And apart from English, right? Now it will take a separate dimension coding which will be saved in a character. Now the highest character which can be saved, he needs near to 2 bytes. So that's the reason why character is allocated 2 bytes. Now based on your requirement, we normally go. So we normally go with the average one, which is 8, because it serves both lower and higher types, at least for a range. Now normally it is true that for long we can't save a long value in int, because long can have 8 bytes, whereas int can take only 4 bytes. Right? We'll actually see that castings too. Not a problem, right? So here when you come to floating, you have two data types, which is one is a float, which is of 4 bytes, and other one is a double, which is of 8 bytes. Right? Now, why I've taken decimal aside is decimal is the data type which have got a huge memory allocation capacity. Your decimal data type is decimal, which can have 16 bytes of memory. It can save data till 16 bytes. So you have to be careful while using decimal. If you are defining a decimal, which means you are allocating 16 bytes, even if you give that much data or not, doesn't matter, but it will allocate 16 bytes. So make sure, right? And your Boolean is a bit type. It's a single bit, not even a byte. It is a bit type where it can save 0 or 1. So the possible values are true and false. That's it. Now the data type is your Boolean, right? Which can save a true or false. Internally, whenever you give true, it will save 1, and whenever you give false, it will save 0, which is a bit type. And a string type is something which is like, it is like an object type which can save your strings. So normal data type is your string, and this doesn't have any limit. You can save as much as string you can. Right? So these are the major classifications of your data types, and all data types comes under one thing called object. Object is like, it's a parent of, it can hold anything. Object is like, king of all data types, right? Any data type we can actually hold an object. Right? So these are the data types which we have in C#, right? So floating, we'll see different examples with different data types and castings to typecasting to one data type to other data type. Already have a float. We already have a float, so why use decimal type? Okay. See, float is only 4 bytes, right? If you have a decimal value which even exceeds your float and double, right? Normally in your huge applications, right, you may have to go with the higher data types. Then you can actually go for decimal. The memory allocation is the only constraint here. The float and double can hold data till 8 bytes only. If you want more than that, then you have a